So what I thought we might do, actually for the next, not sure how many weeks, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, maybe even longer, is to talk a little bit about, each week, a little bit more about Kirtan. I mean, I know you've come because you like it, but on the weekend, on Saturday, I had the great fortune and opportunity to speak to a bunch of yoga teachers. In fact, it was the yoga teachers from here. And they were having a workshop and a whole bunch of, had some new yoga teachers and things like that. And so we were speaking about, what is yoga? What are the benefits of yoga? What actually is yoga? So we talked about that for a while. And then someone had a question about, they were saying that, they've done the yoga teacher training, they've taught in different schools, but they've never come across Kirtan in the different yoga schools that they've worked in or have been to. It's a new experience. Although, she was aware of Kirtan, but had never actually, none of the yoga schools or studios she'd been in or worked in had actually practiced it. So she wanted to know more about, well, what is Kirtan? I mean, we had Kirtan as part of our program on Saturday, so, she knew what, this experience of Kirtan is as far as the chanting, but, what's the basis for it and where's the origin of it and what are the benefits of it? So it kind of sparked an idea in Madhulila and I that, sometimes it's, we kind of take it for granted because, well, for myself, I've been practicing Kirtan for too many years. It's been that long I can't remember how long it is. No, I remember my first experience of Kirtan was 1977, and I hated it. I didn't like it. I couldn't imagine why people would want to do it. I had a whole bunch. I was already, a yogi. I was already doing, serious meditation practices, serious yoga practices, and this chanting thing just seemed a bit frivolous, a bit, kind of not real. You know what I mean? You're singing. How can that be spiritual? Not only how can it be spiritual, but, what benefit? Okay, so you get to sing a little bit. Well, that's always good. But really, compared to real spiritual practices, real hardcore stuff, how is this? What's the benefit of it? So I wasn't like some initial attraction to it. But I learned. The more I studied, the more I practiced, the more I experienced, the more I heard. The more I practiced, the more I experienced, the more I heard, the more I practiced, the more I experienced. Well, here I am before you today. So obviously my initial take on what Kirtan was or is was far from complete. So I know, different people come along and, over the years we get to speak to people and, some people come along and they immediately take to it. It's bam, this is what I've been looking for, man. I've tried every other kind of meditation. I've done this, I've done that, I've been here, I've been there. I've taken this drug and that drug and, I've tried ayahuasca and tried all this stuff. But for some reason or other, this just sits right for me. I just feel like I'm at home. And other people come in and they're a little curious but not really sure. Like I know I've told this story before, but it's not uncommon and some of you may not have heard it. But before we moved into here a couple of years ago, and we have our second anniversary coming up fairly soon and a celebration for that. But before we were having our kirtans here, we're having our Sunday kirtan at the library hall at Burleigh Heads. And it was upstairs above the library. And so you had to go up these 2 little bits of stairs to come up into the main room. And there's actually one friend, a person who's become a friend of mine now. I think if I recall right, he can correct me. He just had his first boxing match. And he was pretty confident that he was just going to win, knock the guy out. Surprising to him, not to the other guy, but surprising to him, he lost. And he was cruising around down the beach there at Burleigh and kind of walked by and heard the singing, the chanting, and cruised up to have a listen to what it was. He didn't go out of his way to find it. He wasn't looking for it. But he came in and thought, well, this is strange but interesting. How many years later is it? 7 years later? The guy's still here in the room tonight. So that was kind of his bit of curiosity. So obviously you don't mind it, mate. He doesn't mind it, yeah. So it's, it can be something like that. So there's obviously something in the kirtan, something more than just, singing, right? And then there's another gentleman who also is still coming. Anyway, this is many years ago as well. He kind of heard, again, he didn't come looking for it, didn't see an ad, but he kind of was walking by the library hall and he heard it. And he walked by for a couple of weeks and it was there, so he thought he'd check it out. So he walked up the first set of stairs, and for those who have been there, you know what I'm talking about. Then you kind of turn and then you come up another set of stairs, and there's like a railing there, and then you got to step into the main room. And usually we were down that end. And so he said the first time he came up just to the second top stair and kind of looked over the railing that was there. And from what I recall, he said it was pretty strange. So those who have been before know sometimes we get up and we dance and, sometimes even go a little crazy. Yeah, from the external point of view, it's going, oh yeah, what are these guys on, right? So he looked in there, and apparently it was a night when it was, a bit of a rock out, kirtan, and people were jumping and bouncing into each other and going a bit crazy, a bit wild, running around and, shouting Krishna at the top of their head, top of their lungs. He said he kind of stayed there a bit and watched it and decided, nah. And then he walked down and went away. But for some reason he came back the next Sunday, just curious. But this time he came up to the top of the stairs and came a bit earlier. And just as you just go around that first little railing thing, there's some chairs there. So he sat tentatively on the edge of the seat, on the first seat just around the thing at the top of the stairs. And he stayed a little bit longer this time. Anyway, so it kind of progressed, and then after a couple of weeks, he ended up going to the back of the hall, the last row of seats at the back of the hall. So now he's slowly coming in. And anyway, after a while, he became right at the front, where Nathan and these guys are, every week. Bam, right in the front, right in the middle. So everyone's experience of kirtan, starts a little differently. Some people immediately experience something, and some people are not sure, and like for me, I actually did not like it. So it kind of is like that. So how is it? What is it? That's what I want to kind of read a couple of nice things and talk a little bit about it. So I was talking to the yoga teachers about the origin of kirtan, which I won't go into in depth, but sacred mantras and the chanting of mantras is there in the sacred yogic Vedic text since time immemorial. The Vedic and yogic, sacred texts were written down around 5,000 years ago by a great sage called Srila Vyasadeva, known as Veda Vyas, because he wrote down. He didn't write, he compiled this Vedic truth, this Vedic teaching, which was passed down orally since time immemorial from self-realized yoga master to their students in this unbroken chain of self-realized spiritual teachers and students since time immemorial. So he compiled these teachings around 5,000 years ago. So this chanting of sacred sound, of mantras, is there throughout all of the Vedas. But generally it was confined to the priestly class, what was known as Brahmin priests. The general population, only on certain occasions and in certain ways, they may chant mantras, but usually it was like they were given a silent mantra from their spiritual teacher, something like that. It wasn't a broad thing like this, where all kind of, riffraff, if you don't mind me describing us, as all kind of riffraff are here chanting these sacred mantras. Previously, you would not be allowed in. You are not qualified. You have to train from when you're 5 years old, for many, many, many years, because there are certain rules that govern the chanting of sacred mantras. There's a certain pronunciation which you have to have perfectly correct. Cannot be any mistake at all. There's a certain meter and a certain timing and a certain rhythm and even, a certain volume and there's a certain length of certain parts of the mantras that have to be of that perfect length or shortness according to these different grammatical marks that are above the Sanskrit mantras. It tells the person how to chant them, as they're meant to be. Some long here, some short here, some extended, etc., etc. So this was, they were there in the Vedas, in the yogic text, but not available to the masses of people. But 500 years ago, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, this great spiritual personality, he appeared in Bengal, in India, 530 odd years ago, and he inaugurated what we are experiencing here today and what is being spread around the whole world. This congregational or group singing and chanting of these names of the Supreme, these yoga transcendental mantras. So the difference is that we are not chanting these different sacred mantras. Like there are so many mantras in the Vedic teachings for different purposes. They use different mantras for weddings, for funerals, for coming of age, of starting your business, and all kinds of things. Like I said, all different reasons they have the chanting. But this practice of Kirtan or Sankirtan is actually the congregational or group chanting of the many names of God. So these are not just for other reasons. These are actually sacred names of the divine. So he inaugurated that this movement that everyone, no matter their caste, color, creed, sex, education, nationality, no qualification needed at all, none. You didn't have to have a professional voice to be able to sing everything, in harmony. You can be singing flat, you can be singing out of key, out of time, and the effect of chanting these names is equal. So it has nothing to do with any qualifications whatsoever. Everybody and anybody can join in and experience it. And Chaitanya's mission or his goal was to spread around the whole globe, in every town, in every major metropolis, in small villages, in individual people's homes, that there would be the chanting of these names of the divine. So he left behind these 8 amazing texts pertaining to this chanting of these sacred names. I'm not going to read them all now, but there's a couple of things I wanted to read just to establish what are the benefits. Why do this? Other than you come along and you get a feed, not everybody will let you go to their concert and sing, right? Join in like that. There's some weird people who are here. There's some nice people that are here. And there's some nice weird people that are here, and everything in between. So there's many reasons why we come, right? So what I'd like to read is a couple of things. And just if you can just consider, what I'm reading, the ideas. This is something very nice from my spiritual teacher, Jagad Guru Siddhaswarupananda. And then I want to read something which is in connection with this from Chaitanya himself. So my spiritual teacher says, mantra meditation is the greatest gift of yoga. So I can stop right there and speak about this for a very long time. There are so many gifts that we get from yoga: increased, mental clarity, able to deal with stress, our body feels more comfortable. So many things are the gifts of the tree of yoga. So here he is saying this practice of mantra meditation is the greatest of all the gifts that the tree of yoga gives us. So this gives us a little beginning of an insight in how wonderful this is. I'm sure here there's many people who practice yoga asanas and maybe a yoga diet and, different parts of the yoga lifestyle. So here we are with the greatest gift of yoga. Goes on to say, all yoga processes are certainly valuable gifts because they directly or indirectly help one physically, mentally, or spiritually. But the most wonderful of all of these processes, and therefore yoga's greatest gift, is mantra meditation. Why? Because mantra meditation makes self-realization truly possible. Truly possible. Indeed, and this is the part I'm attracted to, easy. Mantra meditation makes self-realization truly possible, indeed easy, for every single one of us. So this is a beginning of an understanding of what this kirtan truly offers, what the benefits, there's the benefits of, Madhulika's beautiful voice, of my expert bass playing, of my guided, there's all these benefits we get from coming here. But here we understand that the real gift of kirtan, through regular practice, is actually that self-realization is truly possible and in fact easy. So normally, when we read books, if you read books like, Autobiography of a Yogi or this or that book, all these books, my time in the Himalayas with the Tibetan yogis and all this stuff, right? And it's all about these guys, people who give up life and they've got to renounce everything and they live this very simple, austere, difficult, cold life in a cave or a monastery somewhere, and you've got to do so much, there's so much austerity and this and that, and even then there's no guarantee that you'll succeed after lifetimes and lifetimes. So we may think, well, I'm not prepared to give up my family, I'm not prepared to give up my job, my comfortable lifestyle, my nice car, my nice smartphone. I'm not that interested in self-realization. Maybe in another lifetime, I'll become more serious. But here we understand this practice of congregational, particularly the congregational chanting of the names of the divine, actually can bring us to that higher state of samadhi or self-realization by this simple practice, this easy practice. And as we go along through the weeks, we'll delve deeper into how and why. So this means you're going to have to come back if you want to know the more hows and whys. But here is the first thing to keep in mind. We're not just chanting and going a bit crazy because we are weird. There's actually a deeper reason for it. And this is actually achievable. This self-realization is achievable by every single one of us, every one of us. Not just the guy sitting up here giving a talk, not just that person's spiritual teachers. Every single person can achieve the highest platform of spiritual life through this practice of kirtan. So just to read from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, where he says the same thing I'll read it, then you can understand. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, "Glory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtan, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years together. Thus the fire of conditional life, of repeated birth and death, is finished, it is extinguished. The Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction. Benediction means like a blessing. Is the prime benediction for humanity at large because it spreads the rays of the benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss, and it enables us to taste fully the nectar for which we are always anxious." So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in harmony with the yogic or Vedic sacred text, is saying that actually everything, what you are looking for, freedom from birth and death, freedom from worries, actually transcendental wisdom or knowledge, these are all contained and all experienced and all provided to us through the regular practice of kirtan. And we begin to taste that nectar, that happiness, that joy, that satisfaction for which we are always anxious. So this is a little bit about how wonderful Kirtan is and how there is so much more benefit than we may be thinking that there is. It is the greatest gift of yoga. Thank you very much. So as I said, we'll continue next week and so on, and we'll explore deeper this beautiful practice of Kirtan. So again, as I touched on in the beginning, not everybody was here. There are a couple of things going on. We're actively listening as the person is chanting these beautiful names. So there's an activity, easy, but an activity of conscious listening. And then we are consciously singing, listening to the sound as we hear it, as we sing it, and then resting and finding shelter in these beautiful names. And you will directly experience yourself how wonderful they are and what the benefits are.